You remember maybe, I don't know, 3 episodes ago, we said, hey, we just set up a set of principles for the studio.
Yes.
And then we left a cliffhanger where we were going to reveal.
Oh my God, how many people are still hanging on that cliff?
Some principles.
Their hands are fatigued.
Butterscotch Hey everybody, welcome to episode 147 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the lever of unanswered Stack Overflow questions.
I'm Sam and I'm the Clone Army director.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is April 2018. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen in this show. There's going to be profanity. So if there's a child around, throw him out the window.
Was that April Toothy or April 2-3?
April Toothy.
Toothy.
It's the day of the dentist, as they say.
Yeah, they do say that.
All right, well, let's get on to some news, gentlemen.
I mean, happy Dentist Day, though, everybody.
Happy Dentist Day.
It's going to hurt. You can get stabbed in the teeth a lot.
Yeah, they go, now make sure you don't clench your teeth. Make sure you don't like take any, sharp or horrible objects and put them in your mouth. Now, if you quickly open your mouth, we got to clean it with a ice pick. And that's, for some reason, that's how you do it.
And then the suck tube that's going to get the blood out of there real fast.
You got to just suck that blood right out because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like a gusher. All right. Crashlands beta. It is now on iOS. That's chugging along. We had some crashes.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny because we have our own little device that we tested on in the studio.
A little iPad Mini 2.
And the reason it's an iPad Mini 2 is because we wanted a really not powerful one, right? This is an old device.
We always buy weak devices because we are cheap, but also because it makes for good testing.
Because the theory is if it works on this, it'll work on everything.
It'll work on whatever.
So it worked on that. So it should have worked on everything. Turned out it didn't. It crashed on basically everybody's device who had played the game before. I can't remember exactly.
The kicker was it was a fresh install on the iPad Mini 2, so there was no sort of old game residue lying around.
Nothing clogging up the works.
Nothing clogging up the game tubes. And the problem is, on existing players' devices, they already had Crashlands. They got the beta. Something in there got in the tubes, got stuck, and then it couldn't load. Then the pipes burst.
Had some plaque in between the teeth or something.
Yeah, we had to get an ice pick in there. So Sure spent his weekend
got out his pick.
And now the blood all over the place.
Yeah, the thing is the game was bleeding a lot over the weekend, but I think maybe we got it all sucked up.
As of yesterday. And then sort of conveniently, you have to go through iTunes in order to approve your beta stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we can't just patch it directly. We have to wait a little bit. And conveniently, iTunes went down for maintenance on Saturday. So we had a 12-hour
Saturday morning, everybody's like, the game's crashing. We're like, no problem. Get that patched and then can't
and then wait for 12 hours.
So
it's pretty entertaining, a little stressful, but I think it's really good. Another really good example of why you do beta tests. Because if we would have,
you got to do it.
We were like, oh, this works great. If we would have just kicked that out, it'd be a real bad week.
This is a great patch for our existing player base. No, because none of them can play it because it crashes now.
Yeah. Although had we just had Sam test it in-house, I'm sure we would have found it.
It is true.
Last week I finished up our new contact system for the new website.
Adam's like looking all proud.
Sam, I need you just to play with this a bit. And just, if you got a little bit of feedback. I was thinking some cosmetic changes, And then literally it was just like, he just starts it. He just goes to the page and he's like, oh, this doesn't work. And I'm like, what the and then he goes to the next page. He's like, oh yeah, this is broken. And then he just finds 800 fucking completely broken things. And some of them I was looking at it and I was like, how the fuck did this even work before? It doesn't even make any sense.
But there's always that, well, it worked on my machine.
Yep.
Yeah. And it did.
Yeah. Well, the joke is always, the first piece of feedback you get from anybody about, especially technical stuff, but even art too, is shit's broke.
That's nothing works at all.
Quote, shit's broke. Yeah. So Adam his spine was too straight. He was looking too proud. So I had to get in there, give him some feedback.
Contort his body.
Yep.
Also, speaking of shit exploding, let's talk about wizard keyboards.
I thought you were going to talk about your dog.
Oh, that did happen too. She was sick this weekend.
Not good.
It was a time.
Times were had. But keyboards though. So on my home rig. I can call it a rig because I rebuilt it
because it's a computer.
Yeah, it's a computer, but it's a handcrafted one, which makes it a rig now.
Rig applies to 18-wheel semi trucks.
Yep.
and 18-wheel PC.
And PCs that are so large, they need 18 wheels on the bottom to move them around.
Yes.
So on my at-home rig, I've got a DOS keyboard that's the pure jet black one. So, no visible keys. DAS.
Not DOS, DOS.
Like MS
Yeah,
DOS.
not DOS. DAS, the company or brand? I don't know. But yeah, so DOS keyboard, super nice, mechanical, clicky-clacky thing. Okay. But if you're not used to, we all actually type, if you type like a normal person, you don't look at the keys because you don't need to, right?
There's been plenty of psych stories on this. Most people can't place more than about a third of the keys onto a keyboard.
Yeah, but you can with your fingers, though, right?
Your fingers, no.
But for some reason, we all have this mental hang up where we feel like if we can't see the keys, if we can't see the letters
How am I
on them,
supposed to type?
Yeah, then all of a sudden you think you can't type. So I wanted to get over this mental hang up, which is why I got this sweet jet black keyboard. So I've been using that for a long time.
It's an important note. The entire thing is black. There are no keys. There are no key letters on the keys.
There are no markings.
There are no markings. It's just
it's pure
like
black keyboard.
Yeah.
So that's when Adam says jet black. It's just a dark surface.
It's like the stealth bomber of keyboards.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I've been using that for a long time, and it's fine. Do
you ever have times where you're like, God damn it. Like I'm just trying to find the 5
only
button.
if I'm trying to eat something with like one hand and then trying to use my left hand.
Oh, because then you got to look.
Because
you lose the muscle memory.
And also, but here's a weird thing. When I'm doing my weird passwords, because I got very weird passwords that have lots of combos of things.
Oh, yeah.
I have to look at my fingers. It doesn't actually matter because it's true on my jet black keyboard too. I don't see any letters, but I have to look at my fingers to do it.
You kind of Tony Stark hologram project.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird
From your brain.
I just don't know how you would hit because my first 4 keys I've replaced with red ones since they're my hotkeys that I use.
Yeah.
And so they don't have the secondary symbol on them, like the hash, the money sign, whatever else. And so it's sort of a guessing
That's
game.
because you're not a programmer, so you don't have to use those very often.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's most of what you do as a programmer.
is using those fucking keys that you can't reach. But yeah, so I got the sweet jet black keyboard.
Okay.
And I'm also I'm running Ubuntu because, I'm a web developer and Linux is much more fun for that. But I'm also running a weird window manager on it that doesn't have a UI. So there's no bar anywhere. There's no like desktop. There's none of that stuff, right?
So I'll just say that a regular person who believes themselves like very computer literate, even
if you come to my
Adam's machine,
You're like, I'm going to get in here. You're not
it's
getting in there.
going to be like stepping into a piece of space age technology.
It's very like. So, I really dig my setup.
Adam's computer is basically a space shuttle.
It's super
It
fun.
has 1,000 switches.
It is his and his alone.
Which is part of my pride in this thing that I have, but this became a problem because on what was it, Thursday last week, I had finished transferring bscotch.net over to a new registrar, and the meaning of that doesn't even matter. It just means that I moved this website, which means it broke everything, right? So all the things were like, where is id.bscotch.net? Where's podcast.bscotch.net? All those questions now, the answer is who fucking knows?
They're in the ether now.
They're in the ether. So that means all our websites were just broken. So this is fine, except that the migration I was doing was supposed to not do any of that. I was supposed to carry all that data with it. I backed it up just in case, but I still just hit the button and then
Always
left.
back it up.
I hit the button at home and then left and went to work.
Bold move.
But so I get to work 25 minutes later, boot up my machine, realize that all of our websites don't work. So I'm like,
Classic.
fuck. So that just meant
Which includes bscotch ID, so
just all of it.
cloud saving,
everything's just dead.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, shit, because that thing that I backed up, I just had it open in a text file on my home machine because I didn't actually take that second step
To back it up in
to
Dropbox.
making it available to myself. So then I had to call my wife and say, all right, I need you to
get on this space shuttle.
Get over to my space shuttle and get this document for me, right? And so I'm walking her through these steps, and she's just kind of like rolling her eyes and grunting at me. I could hear the eyes rolling in the sockets as she was doing this stuff because she'd be yelling about my fucking keyboard, and it was a very hilarious. She handled it quite spectacularly. But it was a very hilarious moment of doing that. And then so she gets in and of course, because I've got these alternate desktops.
It's running Linux, right?
It's running Linux. It's got these alternate desktops and there's no way just to know that they're there. So she gets in, I'm like, okay, now you got to hit Alt-9, right? There's all these things that she just has to do to get to the, because I know where each of my windows are and what's on
number
them.
9.
But in order to do that, she has to figure out the shape of the Alt button.
Yeah.
The bottom
And
left.
she has to type in my wacky password.
Oh God, Adam.
On a jet black keyboard where it's like half symbols, and she's not a programmer, right? So those symbols are a little bit tricky to spot. But she remarkably she did it in only 2 tries.
Nice. That was good.
I was impressed.
Probably would have taken me more than 2 tries.
I think it would have.
I would have just unplugged your keyboard and plugged my own in.
Which honestly she might have done. I heard some racket, so it's possible that is what she did. I don't know 100%.
She probably looked at it and just was like,
Fuck this.
I'm gonna get my own.
There's a real danger to like fully customizing your life.
There is, but the danger actually came because I didn't fully implement my backup, because that was really where the problem was. But it did teach me an important lesson, which is that even a super competent person, it takes an extra few seconds plus complete instructions to get access to my machine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's pretty secure.
Good security.
Yeah.
What's security through
obfuscation?
Obfuscation.
Yeah.
You have obfuscated your entire
everything.
The keys,
desk,
everything. Computer. You can't get in.
Where
there.
is it?
You can't see it.
Get in there. I don't know. Yeah, this happens every so often because, of course, I have all of my hotkeys for Inkscape that are on my machine.
Yeah.
And I have them all backed up, so I can just pull them down and basically within like a minute or two kind of get them put into whatever new installation there is.
Yeah, because they're running an external script that's applied on top of it.
Yeah, but even the ones inside of Inkscape that I've kitted out for me in particular too. So what this means that there's 2 completely separate file things you have to do in order to like get an Inkscape version up to the point where I could use it at max speed. And every so often, someone else will have Inkscape open or they're trying to they're mocking up a UI or whatever else, and they'll be like, "Oh, Sam, could you come over and help me with this thing?" And then I'll go over there, and then I'm just like, I'm zooming in and out randomly.
Yeah,
I'm like, I can't do anything because all my keys are completely wrong, and it just takes a really long time to do what normally.
Actually, I used to customize. I still customize pretty heavily like my desktop, as we discussed, right? But after that, I try to customize as little as possible for exactly that reason, which is that I suddenly become non-mobile, and I have trouble because even with like my desktop environment that I've now set up on my home, my work, and my laptop to be as equivalent as possible for my web dev stuff. It took a huge amount of effort to try to figure out what all the things are that are changed off of the baseline operating system, so that when I hit a key combination, like the right thing would happen, And so I wrote a script that now does that for me, so I can just automatically deploy a new operating system that'll work the way I want. But it took me a long time to put that together, and that can only work with Linux. So you can't do that with Windows. So kind of like further trapping me in that space. Now if I go to use a Windows machine to try to do development, it's a fucking nightmare because I just can't do anything. Yeah. It's all so slow. I have to use a mouse all the time.
Oh, gosh.
Horrible.
You have to look at keys.
What a nightmare.
Keys that you can read.
Yeah. It's so overwhelming.
God.
All the
Quit screaming
all
at
the
me.
markings
Letters.
on the keys.
Yeah, markings on the screen. There's like menus and things. It's just
What
horrible.
is this?
Hideous.
What is this? The 90s? I guess no, wait. Menus are new.
Are menus new?
They were in the
Used
90s.
to have menus. Everything was
They had menus in the
things
90s.
used to be a console.
No, that was back in the
early 90s, like DOS.
Sure,
MS-DOS
80s.
days. All right. Anyways, let's go to some industry
Actually,
news.
speaking of those, just real quick,
yeah.
I played. We talked about Pathways in Darkness, I think, a long time ago. One of our old
Pathways
childhood
into
games.
Darkness.
I found an emulator for it and tried it out. Well, this was probably like a year ago or something.
It's not good.
And it's not good, but I couldn't even believe. I have my memory of this game is just like it's the full screen, the whole experience, right? But when I actually played the real thing, there's all these floating because it's basically just like a software application, right? But so there's floating windows. There's a window for your inventory.
Yeah.
There's a window for your actual gameplay screen. There's a window for just like every component, just separate windows.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Photoshop works, right? Like you've got your window where the
layers and your other tool
yeah,
docks. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. But it's not even all in one inside of like one thing.
No, yeah, it's
each one's a
floating
separate
windows.
floating window. And I was
very clever.
Yeah, but it was really horrible.
It was probably because
so
it's probably because they were like, let's see, Microsoft has their new Windows operating system. We got to use the Windows because that's everybody loves
in the name.
It's all about the Windows.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Wasn't that Bungie that made that?
Yeah, it was Bungie.
Cool.
Yeah, that was
school Bungie.
Yeah, if you want to see the precursors to games like Halo,
yeah, go try out
Pathways into Darkness.
Yeah, and then you just get to remember everybody started somewhere.
Everybody started somewhere. They started with paper thin 2D sprites of three frame animation headless monsters that spit snot at you out of their faces. So, industry news: Valve, they bought Camposanto, the creators of Firewatch,
and the upcoming In the Valley of the Gods.
Yeah,
what is
this?
It came out of nowhere.
What is this?
We read this news and we're all like, I don't understand. I'm trying to put it together, but I can't.
Every now and then some things happen where we're like, oh, I see where this is going. We do not see where this is going.
This is. I'm very excited for Campus Senate. That's awesome.
Maybe,
and apparently, maybe who
we
knows?
don't know.
It's
they seem very happy about it.
According to the news, it's a very hands-off thing. It sounds like reading the way that it's explained. Basically, Valve was like, "We'll just take on the financial burden. You guys keep on making games." Right. It was kind of what it sounded like was going to happen,
which is pretty rad.
That sounds
which
pretty
could
good.
be a good deal.
So this is one of the few times where I would say this is probably fine, because oftentimes you'll see a larger publisher buy a smaller studio, and then they get shut down or their projects get canceled or whatever because that studio is no longer a studio. They're an investment. And as soon as it seems like that investment might not pay off, then somebody's got to cut their losses, right? And so, this is the reason why we don't ever seek out outside funding or anything like that ourselves. But in the case of Valve, they just kind of have infinite money. So
they'll be good.
Yeah.
So they could even, no matter what Campo Santo does, Valve could just, if they wanted to, view it as a loss leader and be like, we just want them to keep making awesome games and put them on Steam.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and it won't even
the
be
more money they have, the more awesome their games can be.
Yeah, it'll make the Steam platform just better. But they even said in that thing too that they weren't going to force Campo Santo to restrict their launches to Steam either. So there'll still be cross-platform launches and the whole thing.
Yeah. So it's hard to see like what the value is for.
Well, but I think on the Valve side, because they can push sales of a game because they can do they can do a full page takeover, right?
Yeah, there might be some bias in the feature treatment.
I have a suspicion. Think about how well, because they also got spectacular feature treatment when they launched Firewatch, and I think they've even gotten a full page takeover.
They got like the half page, like the thing people get now, which is like a half page sort of fade down thing,
right? Yeah, so they got really good feature treatment. That game, of course, did spectacularly. So I think Valve can see that, worst case scenario, they roughly break even on something. Because I think this next game they're making looks very intense and very costly,
but awesome.
And it has potential to make a lot of money. So I think Valve will do just fine with it. And they seem to want to put some stuff in their wheelhouse that says Valve on it, Yeah.
Just new games coming out that are made by Valve.
Yeah. Yeah,
or funded at least by Valve.
I think it's I think they're at the point where since they haven't made stuff for so long, I don't know if they have any game makers left, right?
Yeah, except for Gabe, maybe. Yep. He's still working on Half-Life 3, I think. In the back. Is he? That's a weekend project.
What does he do over there? Is he like running a company? Does he not do anything? Does he make games? Like I don't know.
He's just doing game stuff.
Speaking of giant companies who do launch games, because there's an interesting thing that happened, which is God of War came out, the fifth one in the series, and has been getting just sterling reviews. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is sort of the next thing in gaming. Because apparently it's just so good from a design perspective, from visuals perspective, just everything. And there's a really interesting article that was talking about, why is it that something like God of War or The Last of Us, both of which are produced by Sony, were able to be these like standout single player experiences. And a big part of
Sony,
it is
the people who make TVs.
Well, at the PlayStation, important.
They make all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah. So the big point there is that they have the resources necessary to be able to like really fully fund these, frankly, just like
dream projects for
people. And God of War took 5 years. And there's this fantastic video now floating around of the game director reacting to seeing the Metacritic score for the first time. Which I think is really good because it really shows that there are people who made the stuff. And
it means something.
And we read the reviews too, And it was really interesting to watch that video. But I think it's an interesting place where the industry is going, where you have these really huge single player experiences, or just really high fidelity, or whatever else that actually a lot of people in the middle or at the bottom in terms of size or general scale can't actually produce reliably because you can't fund it. So who knows? Who knows where this is all going?
Yeah.
I don't.
Me neither.
My only complaint is it's a PS4 exclusive.
I know. I want to play it.
Yeah, why would Sony do that? Crazy. They need to take a page out of Valve's book and just be like, just do whatever. Just put it wherever you want. Maybe it will. I mean, maybe it'll be an exclusive for, just 8 years or something like that. And then it'll probably come out on PS5.
My bet is because PS4, console hardware is very specific. And so when people are making these very aggressive, very complicated, high fidelity, high resolution games,
perfectly optimized.
It's perfectly optimized for this platform. So my bet is that in order for it to go anywhere else, they'd probably have to basically recode it, which is not going to happen.
But listen, I have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic on my phone. which means 15 years from now, I can get God of War 5 on my phone.
Because we can run a PS4 emulator on our phones, which will then be able to run God of War 5
at 130 frames per second.
Easily.
Yep.
In your pocket.
Just wait. You just got to bide your time.
Yeah. If there's any games you just really want, just wait and get on your phone.
That generally is my philosophy, though things don't really seem to come out of the PlayStation trap.
Yeah. Last of Us still over there.
I really just
But you know what? It's working because every day I'm like, maybe today I'll get a PlayStation.
I know.
Those titles, those are console selling titles. Is the thing.
Yeah. What's that?
Think about Breath of the Wild. Like people will buy a Switch for that. Once again, every day I'm like, maybe this weekend is the weekend,
which means eventually you will, right? Because this is one of those. What's that problem called? Where basically every day you roll the dice, and so just one of these days you're going to roll it, and it's going to take you to the Switch, right? Which means you might as well just stop worrying about it, just buy it now.
Well,
because it's going to happen.
I got to save a little bit,
but it's just going to happen, you know.
As much as I would like to just have all the things right now, I should probably spread it out a little bit.
I mean, it is more, appropriate and responsible,
more feasible.
I gotta adult this thing. All right. So other news, we got some life news. Let's talk about the brome. Let's talk about Sam got this thing called a brome. It is a squirrel
busting machine.
It doesn't bust squirrels in like a violent sense. It just keeps them from eating seeds.
Even though I would be also fine with brome making a machine that actually just destroyed, just liquidated the squirrel in contact.
Our little auto turrets, sort of Predator style.
Just something that would just blow them to smithereens.
That's
just turn them into red dust. But
that's the pro version of the squirrel bird feeder.
We talked about it last week on the podcast, which is trying to find those things, solve those problems that you have that just annoy the shit out of you. Squirrels eating my bird seed, big problem. Googled it, found this feeder called the brome. Made by a company called Brome. It's a squirrel buster. And so I got one, got to my house and I installed it over the weekend. And it took about 15 minutes to put together, filled up a seed, looks great. And you have to sort of hang it out a little bit from wherever the pole is that it's attached to, so that the squirrels can't just, reach over and get in there, because it relies on their body weight in order to work. And
so the squirrel gets on there, the doors close.
The doors to the seed close, and also sort of it jars a little bit. So usually they kind of freak out and leap off. And so I get this thing set up, and I'm like, I'm not sure if it's high enough. I hope it works. And then I go, and I'm just watching out the window. And this goddamn squirrel, of course, just saw me fill it up with seed. And so he comes over there. He's watching. He comes over there, and he jumps on the pole to try to get up there. So he climbs up and then grabs onto it, and it has this slip grip thing, which is basically a false grip that is on the top of it, so that if they grab it, then they fall. And so he grabs that and falls, and the gate's shut, and then he's like looking very pissed off and running around a little bit, and then he tries again, jumps up from the bottom, falls off again. And so it was basically 5 minutes of pure entertainment.
Every piece of this machine is designed to just piss a squirrel off.
It's kind of like that platformer. What was that platformer called where the developer predicted Puzzle Trap. He predicted everything.
Trap Adventure. Yeah.
He predicts everything that you're going to, if you haven't seen GIFs of this, you should go watch them. But he predicts everything that you're going to do and then just makes that suck for you. Yeah. It's fucking hilarious.
Like if you go to a ledge and you pause for a moment, then the ledge just goes bloop and pops off and you just fall to your death.
So this is so funny.
This bird feeder is that for squirrels. That's awesome. So every move that they make has been designed to turn into a false start.
I also love the idea of whoever it was that was inventing this thing. And so they made a prototype and they would go put it out in their yard and just take notes and be like, what did the squirrel try this time?
What if I use a slippery grip?
Oh my God, it's incredible. So it turned what used to be, I would go put seed out and then it'd be gone in a day because these fat squirrels would come eat all of it, into now it's an
entertainment.
I get entertainment. So I go look out the window every day now.
Every morning you get up and you're just drinking your coffee and just go, hey.
Yeah. Well, the thing is and two of the squirrels have learned that they can't get anything from it. So they just aren't around. They just left. So I'm still waiting for maybe a new guy to show up to the neighborhood. False starts on him so I can enjoy myself. But yeah, I have cardinals now. I got a cardinal pair who are hanging out, and
we had a couple blue jays show up yesterday in our backyard. Nice. My wife was like, "What is that?" I don't know. She hasn't seen a lot of birds. She's from the city. And I was like, those are blue jays. This shit's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Midwest, we've got the bright red and the bright blue birds.
So apparently blue jays, I think they might get too big, so they actually trigger the
probably
the setting of
they can get pretty beefy.
Yeah.
You should
plus they're blue, which is kind of a deeper color, which kind of like pushes it down more.
Yeah, you should just catch some of them and then just kind of like put little helium balloons on them.
There you go.
That way they can tag your bird feeder. Yeah,
there you go.
Dead.
Perfect.
Broomed.
Otherwise, we got a little project in the works. Some people into Discord last week were talking about wanting some kind of documentation for the quest for gains, which is the sort of spirit quest that I'm currently going on for the next, I guess, 6. I just finished week 4, so I have 6 more weeks.
Left, yeah.
So it's just a 10-week exercise and dietary regimen for just like getting real fit, getting real beefy and fit. And so I started writing this thing up, and so that I could kind of deploy it into the Discord and say, here you go, if anybody else wants to do this. But as I started writing it, and then I was chatting with Sam about it as well over the weekend, and I was like, it'd be kind of awesome if we wrote this thing like a strategy guide, like a video game strategy guide, because it really just is. A lot of it just comes down to sort of like tracking your progress, measuring your goals, and like all the kinds of stuff that makes video games awesome, right? Is that you get this very quick and immediate feedback about how well you're doing. And that's kind of the strategy that I use to make it through all 10 weeks of this kind of thing. And so I have sections in there about, what kind of hand armor you need, because you got to protect your hands. Things like mana potions. You got to have your refillable mana vial, which is of course a water bottle, because your muscles, when you're using levitation spells with your muscles to lift objects, it just uses a lot of mana, and you gotta drink water to replenish your mana. So we have all these kind of.
Does killing mobs also replenish mana, or is that not an aspect of this?
No, that uses mana.
Oh, shit.
That's a talent you can get, but way later.
Yeah. So I have stuff like the section
you
on
get the right spec.
Yeah. The section on the different exercises is called rep grinding, to talk about grinding reps.
Yep.
And then we also talked about sort of different bosses that you're going to come across. So we have, the bringer of fatigue, and you've got the bringer of soreness and all these different bosses, and kind of when you're going to confront them and
how to tackle them.
What kinds of strats to use to overcome them.
I assume that once this is complete, there will also be an audiobook.
I hope we could.
Yeah,
we could do it. But yeah, so we started writing this thing. I'm about 14 pages in, and it just keeps getting cooler. And I'm like,
I saw the first few paragraphs or something.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah,
I got a kick out of it.
So it's it's kind of just turning it into something fun that's very relatable for people who are maybe not really that into exercise, but are into video games. And it's like, no, actually, they're very they're very similar things. And so if we can draw a connection between them, then people can just go do it, and it's awesome. So I'm kind of working on that. We'll report back as things progress.
Maybe we should bring some excerpts to read out loud in future episodes. Yeah, actually, speaking of things in future episodes, set up a set of principles for the studio.
Yes.
And then we left a cliffhanger where we were going to reveal.
Oh my God, how many people are still hanging on that cliff?
Some principles.
Their hands are fatigued.
We never did do that. And I don't know if there was a plan. I mean, I know we were just spitballing there, but do we want to talk about?
Well, we hadn't finished refining the principles yet.
That's true. They're now on a poster.
Because we put them on the wall, and we were like, we got to keep them there for a while.
Because we could just talk. Because there's like 12 of them, right? We could just do one at a time for the next 12 episodes.
12 weeks of principles.
12 weeks of principles.
All right, we'll start that next week. Cliffhanger.
If we remember.
And if you don't fall off the cliff for the next.
Yeah. If you're still alive.
Your fingers are so tight.
Yeah, the thing is we may have to accelerate a little bit because people only have 10 fingers. And if we do it over 12 weeks, because I assume each week one finger loses a grip.
You get there like that comical like ping, and then the finger's off, Yeah.
Yep, exactly. That's what's going to happen.
So you only have 8 fingers, and then you got your thumbs, Yeah,
but your thumbs are just hand toes.
Yeah, but they don't really... like if you're hanging on a ledge, your thumbs aren't doing jack shit for you. If you're hanging on like a pole, it's good. But I'm assuming this is a cliff. It's not a pole cliff.
You're hanging on a ledge, but there's little thumb grooves that you can get in there, and they
sort of like you're riding a motorcycle.
It's a throttle. There's a throttle
that you're hanging on. All right, let's get on to some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. If you'd like to get your question into a future episode, head on over there and then do it. First question comes from coolaboola. This one's deep.
All right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
#deep. Do you guys believe in an afterlife? Sorry if the question is too controversial or scientifically defective. P.S. I don't mean... I don't know what that means.
I don't know. I like it.
P.S. I don't mean when a video game character dies. So in real life,
like he knew the route we were going to go. With that.
In real life,
afterlife situation.
So my take on this is, it probably doesn't matter what I believe, because either there is one or there isn't. Right. So it's kind of
are you going to Pascal's wager this one?
No, I'm just saying. Okay. I'm just saying. So, like global warming, either it's happening or it's not happening.
And whether it is happening, though.
And whether it is happening. And there's a lot of evidence.
Yeah, to be clear, it's definitely
there
happening.
is all of the evidence. But you can choose to not believe that it's happening.
But that doesn't impact the fact that it's happening.
It doesn't change the fact that it is totally happening right now, right? Yeah. So I think, the same thing with something spiritual. You can, whatever you want to believe, you believe it. And either you're right or you're wrong eventually. And that's just what it is.
It probably doesn't. It doesn't really matter unless you believe there's some retribution angle in there, where your deeds in life determine which good piece of the post-life puzzle you get to participate in.
Yeah, but you might be wrong.
You might totally be wrong.
Here's the thing: you still might be wrong. You might be right, but you also might be wrong. So,
it's true.
So if you say like, what I believe is that if I don't do things, A through F in life, then I'm going to get retributed. Right. So you're going to live your life by those principles, but also you might have missed thing G.
So you're going to get retributed anyway.
You don't really know. So you should just live your best life.
Yeah. My take is just that it's similar, but I think it's more along the lines of, the only part I know is what's going on now. And
you kind of vaguely,
you actually know very little about what's going on right now.
All right, dudes, I vaguely know what's going on right now. And the other piece that I do know is that at some point I won't be doing this. Like you leave. You're going
to shed your mortal coil.
Shed my mortal coil like a snake.
Ascend to the plane of the ancestors.
Or just dead. One of the two. And but either way, it means an end to whatever's happening here. And all the people I care about, they're here. I know they're here for sure because I'm here too.
And
I'm pretty sure that I'm here.
Even if they're not, it seems an awful lot like that's the case. So you might as well just embrace
it. I want to know, here's what I want to know, you guys.
What?
People always talk about the afterlife, which seems like a very sort of self-centered view in the sense that, now that I'm here, I have to keep being here forever. But what about the before life? Like nobody ever talks about what it was like before you were alive. Because you were dead at that point also.
Right. My guess is it's just a void sandwich,
Yeah, exactly. Being dead is the same as not being born.
Yeah. So you just, that's why.
You're a life sandwich in a void bread. Right?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You're a life sandwich in void bread. And,
but you just see what I'm saying? Because people always talk about the afterlife because now that you're here, it's...
And they can't even imagine being dead. It sounds so scary, but it's just as scary as not having...
It's as scary as it was before.
Yeah, how scary was that?
Scary.
How many of you were scared when you weren't born yet?
There's a great quote. I can't remember where this appeared. Might have been in the Discord. I don't remember.
I think it was in the Discord.
In the Discord about diffusing bombs. Yeah. Sorry, I need to find an attribution to this, but it was whether somebody was, as a bomb technician, if they were nervous when they were diffusing bombs. And they said, no, because if I'm right, great. And if I'm wrong, it's not my problem anymore.
Which is quite true.
Yeah, I think there's nothing to worry about.
Well, yeah, my stance on it is that beliefs are things that are hypotheses to be tested. If it's an untestable hypothesis, you have no right to believe in it. This is my stance on things, right? And if there's no reason to believe a thing, then that means there's no evidence, right? So then you just don't worry about the thing. It's not a thing to believe because it's not a thing you can test. And so that's kind of where I fall on the thing, which is not agnostic, because that implies like you're like, ooh, I don't know, right? But there's just no reason to think there is one.
It might take
I don't.
Slight bend on that, which is that if it's very useful for you to believe it, despite the fact that
if it helps you, and
who cares? So if there's not any credible evidence or just any way to test whatever's happening, then as long as you're not being a dick to other people.
But that's the problem.
That's always the problem.
As soon as you believe that wanting something to be true makes it true. As soon as you believe
No, but I think that's what I'm saying is there's a difference in the truthiness term from Stephen Colbert.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but there is, but that doesn't seem to matter practically. Right?
That is true, right?
Because the moment that a person is willing to make that move once in one domain, where they'll say, you know, I love the idea of this because it gives me a sense of purpose or whatever. I agree, that's beautiful right there. Except that also opens the door for like, I'm going to treat myself with homeopathic remedies instead of seeing a real doctor, you know, or whatever. The list then now, do you just open these floodgates, right?
So my wife and I started watching Westworld.
I still need to see this.
Okay. It is zany. Real quick, for those who don't know the core premise of the show.
Don't spoil it.
No, I can spoil it.
Okay.
We only watched like 2 episodes. So the core premise is sometime in the future, there's this sort of like theme park that is just a huge area of land that a company has bought, and they have populated it with extremely lifelike synthetic humanoid sort of androids who every day they reenact sort of like what life was like in the Old West. And so tourists who are super rich, they come in small groups, and they get to sort of live a day in the life of, you know, whatever, but they get to do whatever they want. And so they can go on a shooting spree, like rob a bank, you know, whatever, because you're not doing any real harm to real people, and it's fine, you know, whatever. And so then people go there, they do whatever they want, and then they leave. And then the androids are kind of like repaired. Their memory is reset. And then they start the next day and just do the exact same thing every day. And at one point, one of the androids finds a photograph of a person in New York City. And he's looking at it, and he shows it to his, you know, fake android daughter, because they just assign roles, like this is the daughter, this is the father, you know, whatever. So he shows it to his assigned daughter, and he's like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before. And the daughter looks at it, and she goes, well, that doesn't look like anything to me. And he goes, yeah, but look at it. I mean, look at where is she? What is this? And she just keeps saying, doesn't look like anything to me, because they're all programmed to, if they see something that violates their reality, to just use the phrase, that doesn't look like anything to me.
Interesting.
So they all are programmed to just kind of shrug it off. So they have like an inbuilt confirmation bias where anything that violates their own bubble they can't even see it. Like they can't acknowledge it, which
how does this relate back to the afterlife?
Well, it goes back to this question of, you can choose to believe whatever you want. But I do think it gets to a point where, like Adam's talking about, if you get into the habit of not questioning things, or discarding things that go against your worldview, even if there's overwhelming evidence, then you start to run into some potential issues.
Yeah. Well, I think the other one to me is that I think embracing the part that we know, which is that you do die. We at least know you're living and you die.
Yeah.
We know those two pieces.
There's a lot of evidence for that.
And there's enough beauty in just that fact.
Although everybody currently alive hasn't died yet, so we don't know.
That's true.
We don't know if at some point that's going to stop happening.
It might.
You know?
Yeah. Who's to say?
Who knows if the sun will rise tomorrow?
Or actually, everybody who's currently alive used to be dead, but now isn't. And they haven't died twice.
Yes. Well, they used to be in the void.
They used
in the void. I personally think
born of the void.
Pre-life.
Life is so much more interesting than the void. I just kind of wish everybody would focus on that.
Yeah, I think I'm in that camp too. There's enough going on, and there's enough cool stuff going on.
How cool would it be if people just started referring to the afterlife as the void? The void.
Or a
From
child.
the void we are born, to the void we return.
Or a child would be like, yes, we created this new human brought from the void. It's a fresh soul, a fresh soul from the void.
We've conjured a soul from the void. We've got a fresh soul, about 8 pounds. Pretty good one. Pretty good.
It's a tasty snack-sized life sandwich.
Fun-sized in a void sandwich. All right, next question comes from Duckmaster. What is the best type of mustache? I would say one that's attached to other facial hair.
That is also my opinion, but it's probably because we're not from the 70s.
You know what? I think it's any mustache that you can grow.
There's also that. That's a much more affirming.
Be proud of whatever facial hair you got.
Or don't got.
what if your mustache is just two like real long individual
Here's the
hairs?
thing. If you grow them out long enough and then you comb them
You got to own it.
correctly, then you can make a fake.
Yeah,
make
you
fully
bend it into a
covered-
zigzag.
Yeah, it's like a comb over for your upper lip.
So you, you know, the best type of mustache is just one worn with confidence.
That's true. 100%.
Even if it's two real long wispy comb over.
Even if it's nothing, or even if it's just too much mustache, right? You just, as long as it's like, you don't want your mustache to wear you. You want to wear your mustache, you know?
And otherwise, it is important you keep it tidy.
Yeah.
You know, you keep that thing tidy. Keep it off your lip.
Yep.
You know,
keep crumbs out of it.
keep crumbs out of it. Get some beard
Keep
oil
a
in there.
comb.
Yeah. Comb it. You got to be tidy.
But that all comes down to you got to own it. You
Yeah.
know, you got to.
It's your responsibility.
Some people get a little too carried away with how aggressively they can grow facial hair, and they just let that. It's like shooting out of their face, basically, like this sort of.
It's like if you took Play-Doh and put it in like in a hydraulic press.
Oh, those, yeah.
I saw a video the other day.
You don't. If you were to, so if you were to just like approach someone on the street, if you just yelled at somebody, and you said, "Hey, hold on," and then you ran toward them, would that person think, "Oh my God, I'm being accosted by a forest person who hasn't bathed or shaved in 16 years"? Or would they say, "Look at that fantastic bearded human coming toward me, who is taking great care of themselves"?
They must have something very important to tell me that I must hear.
Yeah, because there's a very fine line between those, and it all comes down to maintenance and hygiene.
Yeah.
So you got to do it. Take care of that. Take care of that shit. Next question comes from Quantum Anomaly. Unintended use of items can make for interesting level design and reward creative thinking, but can also be a toxic crutch for trolls. What are your thoughts on patching levelhead post-launch, and do you have any ideas for how to notify players and creators that some levels are now unbeatable once a bug is patched?
This is kind of like that when Mario Maker changed their physics.
Yes, and they didn't do a patch in like a year and a half or something.
Yeah, then they suddenly invalidated like a fuck ton of levels.
With no fanfare.
Yeah.
They were just like, "Whip, it's done."
Yeah, well, this is actually something we've been talking about a lot because so last week we spent a bunch more time revisiting the movement of GR18 in Levelhead because it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be, and so we basically took to spicing it up a little bit, and so adding a bit of a sprint mechanic and some other interesting things. But a big part of that was sort of exactly talking about this problem, which is like if there's something that we don't like as far as just the basic way that the game operates post-launch, we're not talking about stuff like maybe you're going to tune up a power up or do these few things, but something about the physics or like how the world actually kind of works and reacts to you. Then yeah, we're going to basically be.
I mean, even stuff like the blink, because the blink, you teleport a few spaces, right? If we're like, ooh, this is a little too far.
Yeah.
And
take
we
it back
change
one
it,
space.
take it back a space or make it go a space further. Now all of a sudden a whole bunch of people's level design.
Oh yeah, you can teleport in this game.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to think about because you can look at it as the whole, like, we just invalidated, bajillion hours of work, right?
Which we will. This is when we were talking about Apple rounding the corners of the iPhone X. We were like, how dare they? Well, we're going to have to do it to some
Probably
people
at
as
some
well.
point, yeah.
We're going to round the corners of this game at some point.
Right. I think as long as those patches are rolled together with other cool opportunities for stuff to do. So it's not just the case that you're like, let's invalidate half the levels and you don't have any other new toys to play with. I think that's to me just not a good approach as far as how to handle community and also just excitement around building stuff.
Yeah, but if it's in the case of like Nintendo, where it was a complete physics overhaul.
Yeah,
it's now the game is it's just different now.
It's literally
play
different.
So that's also kind of a cool thing to do because they just kind of decided we just don't like all of it. We want this to all be better, right? And that required just retooling the whole
So here's
thing.
a question. Just throwing ideas out. Again, the game's currently in development, listeners. So don't take any of this as gospel or whatever. What if we gave creators the opportunity to basically nuke all of their levels stats, unpublish it, pull it back down into their sort of creations, change stuff, and then republish it? So of course it would wipe out all of the plays, right? Right. And so it no longer is a valid thing.
I think that'd be a neat thing to do if it were the case that we were going to possibly like break everything essentially.
Well, things just will get broken, so
yeah.
It is there. It is a possibility. But I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could try to handle it. So that's one option. That's a very tricky one because there's a lot of possibilities for people to kind of find ways to try to exploit it.
Yep.
But
well, I think the underlying actual question here, I think, is to what degree do you as a developer owe your player base basically some measure of stability with regard to the game itself? And I mean, and this is a question that goes across literally the whole industry, not just in terms of maker games, but I mean, you're looking at like patch notes for, Call of Duty going out, and then developers who put in that patch about like, oh yeah, we tweaked the firing rate on this assault rifle, getting like death threats from their player base, right? Because it's a change. People don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an interesting question there, because we've also been talking a lot about kind of how we're handling the transition from Butterscotch ID to Rumpus, and how we're doing a bunch of this tech debt sort of stuff we're getting out of. And a lot of the questions we have to answer is just, to what degree do we need to keep things a very particular way for our player base? And to what degree should we actually be operating, with full freedom to do what is essentially the right thing going forward, as opposed to only backward?
Right. So if we take that as an example, the best move for us for the transition from Butterscotch ID to Rumpus is to literally just burn down Butterscotch ID and kill it. And then use Rumpus and actually even take down all of our old games, because they don't make any money. So they're just a pure cost for us. So that would be for us. That would be the most convenient, cheapest, fastest. Everything our lives would be infinitely easier.
It'd be like ripping off a Band-Aid, but that Band-Aid is attached to like a couple 100,000 people.
Exactly.
It's like a real long Band-Aid.
A real long,
right. And this probably isn't the best experience for our players.
Correct.
So the question now we have to answer is, and for a while we were actually seriously entertaining the idea of still just burning it all down, because that's how frustrating it is for us to have to try to fix this problem.
It's a very costly thing to get out of tech debt.
Yeah. And the cheapest way is basically to not.
This actually reminds me of we heard that Terraria 2 got canceled.
Yeah.
Which is the reason, we assume, is that Terraria, the original, is still undergoing constant development. And so to get to a point in Terraria 2 where they recreated everything that original Terraria had, it's now been in development for like 8 years.
Yeah.
So it would take them at least that much time, if not more.
And by then, Terraria's 8 years ahead again.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you kind of hit this weird point where, you got to totally stop work on the previous thing and just kind of leave it in just whatever state it's in. And you got to figure out then, how do you get everybody over to the new thing that's better and easier to manage and whatever.
And knowing that actually most of them won't make that migration, depending on what the thing is exactly. So with Butterscotch ID and Rumpus, it's a little bit different, because we can, at least in principle, replace Butterscotch ID with Rumpus in all of our games. And if we do that, now we basically just force everybody to transition. So that's fine. But that requires us to figure out how do we port data over? How do we do all this stuff? And how do we explain to players what the hell just happened? Because if they download an update and they open it up,
and it just says
now they're logged out, and now it just says log into Rumpus. It's gonna feel like we pulled the fast one on them,
When really it's basically Butterscotch ID 2, but it has a rebrand associated with it. So it's like, how do you just get everybody in there without pissing everybody off also, or confusing the hell out of people? Right.
Yeah. So we got to do it very deliberately.
Yeah,
one game at a time.
We've taken sort of a middle ground stance on it. I think we're not just going to burn stuff down for our own sake, because we do have a big player base that we like, and we don't want to make.
And we don't want to sabotage. I mean, even though Quadrupus and Roid Rage and whatever, like those games aren't really making money, but they still matter. To us and to our players. So we don't want to sabotage those either. Right. So
hard line to walk.
Yep.
We're gonna do it. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be
and no one
slow.
Will even know, and we won't be thanked for it.
And at the end of the day, we're just gonna all have.
We're just hoping to get the minimum death threats possible.
That's always the goal in game dev.
Yeah. You ever ripped off a Band-Aid slowly? Because
it is the worst.
It's like waxing. It's gonna be covered in hair. You're gonna be bleeding. It's gonna be bad. But that's what's gonna happen. That is what's gonna happen. We're gonna do that for you guys, for our listeners.
Yeah.
All right. Next question comes from TJuice. Imagine you all have a fourth brother. Who is he? A ghost? A cowboy?
A ghost?
A robot? Etc. You have art, programming, and web dev. What role would Bro 4 play?
Interesting. Well, here's the question. Where's Bro 4 inserted in the birth order? Is this just like tacked
off to
on?
the side? That's a twin of one of us.
A twin bro. I don't know.
I'm finding it literally impossible to answer this question.
Well, because there's simply
what would be here's a role that I think would be convenient. Pilot.
Like airplane pilot?
Yeah.
Or,
Because if you know somebody who is a pilot, then I assume the way this works is they just give you free rides.
yeah,
sort of
because
wherever you need
pilots
to go.
also, they own the airplane.
They own the airplane. They live in it.
Right.
And that's just what they do. It costs them nothing because they get bestowed all the fuel that they need from the pilots.
Well, plus they're
guild.
just doing it for the love of it. So why should we pay them anyway?
It's true.
Yeah.
It's just like artists.
And their families.
They're going to
So, I
get,
mean,
plus they're going to get a lot of exposure from flying the plane around.
And flying us in that plane in particular. you know?
Yeah. So I think either a pilot or an astronaut, which an astronaut is kind of like a pilot, but they don't do a lot of steering. They just kind of like
Sit on a rocket.
Yeah.
And hope for the best.
And hope it works.
Yeah,
out.
if we're just looking for a brother to sort of do convenient things for us,
pilot, sort of errands,
maybe like a chef.
Chef would be
Chef's a very
good.
good one.
Chef brother would be good.
Yeah. Really, this brother just exists to kind of meet our demands.
Which really means we probably need an AI brother
Yeah.
that we create.
Now-
that way we can just add modules to it to make it.
Now,
really
I've got
work.
an Arduino book coming, so
We're basically nine tenths.
I assume by the time you get to the end of this book, you can essentially make a sentient sort of sibling.
Yeah.
Westworld sort of style.
Just 3D print it.
Yeah.
So
We'll
just do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Then we can maybe make 2 or 3 more of them even. So not 5. That would be
That's too many.
That's too many. Next question comes from Coffee Chemist. Hey guys, I've been doing 2 years of game dev through school and some more personally, and have met somebody who'd like to make games as well.
Cool.
My question is, how do we go from student and game jam games to something that is complete and marketable? And what other considerations do you have to give?
For a marketable game versus a student project.
polish.
Yeah. Polish is basically the difference between those two things.
Well,
And like
polish,
literally an enormous amount of
polish, content, and balance.
Yeah,
are the
really,
3.
really, actually everything.
Basically
Well, I mean,
everything.
it just has to be
I've
better.
never-
Student projects are prototypes at
Yeah,
best.
yes.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yes, yeah. As are jam games.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you can make a jam game that is just like good to go. And even something like, we always talk about, like Roid Rage was a very quick project. It had, I think the original had like 19 hours of development. And then with Butterscotch ID and some other polish we slapped on top, maybe another 30 or something. But it's not that good.
No. It is a tiny, tiny game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, for what we put into it, it did okay.
Yeah. I think the biggest consideration is when you're starting to make
do
that
that
jump,
good.
the reality is that all of those other things that you actually haven't done yet, which is the important note, because if you've just made student projects or just
Yeah,
in
you
game
haven't
jams,
done anything that matters.
yeah, you haven't done the other 80% of the thing, which is basically all of that polish work, all of that playtesting, the marketing, everything else. And so I think the most important note to have is that even if you've made games that you thought were like really fun or maybe could be expanded during a game jam, do not, under any circumstances, make a large project for a first sort of attempt at a marketable thing. Because especially like if you're just coming out of the student zone and sort of the game jams and stuff, what you should do is make a really tightly scoped, but just very polished thing that that gives you the time basically to not necessarily just be doing the game dev on it, but to do these other aspects. So do the playtesting, try out the marketing and all this other stuff, and try to learn how to get on the storefronts, try to learn how to get press and everything else. And you just need time.
Yeah,
And
but
if you
I
make
think
too
even
big
outside
thing-
of all sort of the external stuff, just actually finishing a high quality polished game project.
yeah, and it can be very small, and it's perfectly reasonable.
That almost nobody has done that.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
So just, I mean,
it's hard.
It's hard. It's very hard. And it's very time consuming. And those last most important bits are the parts that make you want to stop.
Yeah, well, here's a fun example. So last week we were working on the power up stuff with levelhead, and so when you're playing as GR18, you can run and acquire these different power ups for your character.
And that's been true since the first week.
However, it's also been boring as fuck since the first week because you just ran and jumped into them, and then Seth just color swapped GR18.
Right. So you touch the power up, you're yellow now. Nothing else happens.
But it's like a blanket yellow, and so it kind of hits different parts of the character weird.
And because also the character's eyes are aqua blue, if we do the red tinting, then your eyes disappear, which is very creepy.
Yeah. So last week we said, you know what, we need to make this actually fun. And this exact moment when someone touches a power up should be a fun moment in and of itself.
Because mechanically the power-ups exist in the game, but as an actual valid sort of finished polished
Fun maker. Yeah.
They just don't.
And so it took, I think, about 4.5 hours of both Seth and I collaborating, like making little art pieces in my case, like 2 of them. I made 2 little tiny art pieces. And then Seth was over there sort of trying to get the timing of how this whole little display of sort of power and cool transformation works. And it was like 4.5 to 6 hours for this. It's a second.
Yeah.
It's 1
for
second.
1 second. It's also for a part that you don't think is part of the game because it's purely cosmetic.
Yeah. It actually pauses the game while it happens. So nothing can even happen in the game.
It actually draws attention to the fact that it's ruining your gameplay experience by pausing it, right?
It's like, hey, you want to stop real quick?
Yeah. But it turns out that it feels so good when that happens that it adds this just enormous boost to the quality feel of the game.
Yeah.
So I think the really, really important part of that sort of finishing a project is that polish piece. So if your character is jumping or getting a power up or whatever else, there's just a mountain of work that still have to be done once you're even mechanically or even what appears to be visually complete with the project. Because it's very unlikely that you're polished complete.
Yeah. So there's a fantastic TED radio hour from this past week. So that's an NPR show that sort of they take a theme and they find a suite of TED Talks that sort of all wrap around that theme. They merge them all together into a 1-hour podcast episode. And then they also interview the creators of those as well as authors and stuff like that. So this last week, they talked about people's relationships to their work and sort of how people view the things that they create and how people are motivated to do the things that they do. They did this experiment where they had people follow a set of instructions to fold some kind of an origami. And at the end, they said, now this isn't your origami that you made. This is ours because it's part of the experiment. But if you want to buy it from us, we'll sell it back to you at, whatever price, if you're willing to buy it. And some of those people bought the origami back, right? So then there was a second group where instead of having them fold the origami, the researchers just showed them a finished origami thing that was identical to the ones that the other people were folding. They just said, hey, would you be willing to pay for this? And if so, how much? So the people who folded their own origami were willing to pay 5 times more for it than the people who just saw it. And when asked if they believed that other people would also be willing to pay that much, they almost unanimously said, yeah, totally. That's just how much it's worth. Right. So to take this effect to the next step, the researchers found an even uglier origami that was way harder to fold. So it's just hideous.
Hideous, but requires way more work.
Just way more work to get it done. And they ran the experiment again with this hideous origami. And of course, the people who were shown it were like, no, I don't want to buy that. And the people who folded it themselves were wanting to pay even more for it. And they believed that other people would be willing to do the same. So this, I think, is one of the things that you see this effect over and over and over again with people who are kind of first getting started, where their attachment to their work largely comes from the amount
their investment
into it. And they have a hard time detaching themselves from it because I think this
is true for artists, this is true for writers, this is true for everybody.
No, it's a human psychological trait.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, we felt that when we first made Towel Fight and we were like, we spent 3 months on this thing and we're going to sell it for $3 fucking dollars. Like feels
bad.
That hurts.
And then nobody bought it.
And then nobody bought it. And we were like, wow, we overcharged. And then even, Crashlands, we spent 2 years of our lives making it. And then we handed over for $7, $15.
$5 at the time we sold it.
It was $5 at the time we sold it, and then we put it on sale sometimes for $3 or $2. It's like,
and people still complain about the price.
Yeah. And it's like, we could drop 2 years of our lives into something. And for another person, it's worth
$2.
I guess like a third. It's worth 20 minutes at minimum wage, right? Like that's the value that we can create. Of course, once people have it, then they value it more and everything like that. But
which is just another psychological
phenomenon. It's called the endowment effect. But I think this is something that is the hardest part because you'll, as a student, as somebody who's first getting started, you will feel like your game is really good.
And it's not though.
You just got it.
Probably just
you have to find ways to evaluate it more honestly, getting it into the hands of people who you trust, people who aren't your friends,
Doing any local playtesting you can with community events and stuff like that. It's always really interesting.
Yeah, and you also see people who are first doing this do stuff like they'll talk their game up. You know, they'll give their game to somebody to play test it, and then they'll explain to the person how they should feel.
Yeah, like, oh, this part's really cool. And
and it just ruins the whole thing. Yeah. And so I think this is actually one of the hardest parts is finding ways to remove your emotions from this evaluation process, to take your ego out of it, because nobody cares. Like, nobody cares that you made it. Nobody cares that you spent 2 years working on it. It's hard to accept that that's the way it is, but it doesn't matter. So once you can get past that, then I think you'll start to see it for what it really is.
Well, you start making better stuff because you're not the feedback you get is both easier to take, and you're able to actually see it usually before it comes. This is the good part where you're like, oh, I can tell where this is horribly broken, which is actually, I mean, a lot of the point we've gotten to now is, with Crashlands, like, most of what all of us see when we play it are the problems.
Yeah. If you hand your game to somebody and they surprise you with a criticism, that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Because you should have already,
where the weak points are. Right.
Yeah. And that to me is a sign where if somebody talks about something about your game that they don't like, and if you are A, surprised, and B, upset,
or C, defensive,
right, then you're just doing it wrong, because what they believe is right. Yeah. Like, that's because they're the one who's consuming the game.
Well, I think the better way to think about it is what they feel is correct. What they believe about whatever's happening is probably not correct.
They might be wrong about the reasons, but their feelings are real. And their experience is just what it is, because you gave them that experience.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, as a person who's done only jam projects or only school projects, you're not going to have a lot of exposure to that specific sort of development of that specific skill set.
Though having a partner in crime is going to be
helps a ton.
Because I think this is mostly a problem for solo devs, because there aren't two eyeballs, or for situations that are very, very delineated, where like someone's the designer and someone's the programmer or whatever. If things are very separate, then you're basically a solo dev again, right? And that's where you don't get enough objectivity and enough eyeballs on the thing, even just within the development team. Because I think just doing it and having people look at it after you've spent 6 months on a thing and saying, what's wrong with this now, right? Like, you waited too long. Yeah, that's not. You were designing basically in a vacuum that you had no legit objectivity inside of. And that objectivity is a thing you just have to develop and nourish over these experiences of interacting with other people. And you can't just do it by yourself. You need to have somebody else in there.
Yeah, partners help a ton for keeping some good.
So if you got a partner for this, then at the very beginning, just outline how important to each other explicitly the communication is going to be about whether things are good enough and what's required and all this kind of stuff. But also acknowledge that you can't make a perfect thing. Yeah. And that's not the goal. As Seth said, every time we play Crashlands, any of us, we just see like 1,000 things that we wish were different. But we also know why every single one of those things is not different. Because we had to make a judgment call about, given the cost and more importantly, the further implications of making these specific things different. Should we, because that's going to propagate
leverage.
It's all a question of leverage. Should we? It's going to propagate in other things. And also it's just very costly to do that.
Well, and you have to kind of recognize that although like if somebody plays your game, their feelings are always true. Like they're never wrong about how they feel, because that's just it's just what it is, right? But that doesn't mean that they're always right about their suggestions, right? I remember
it also doesn't matter necessarily that they're right.
Yeah.
Right. Just because they don't like something and they're right to not like that thing doesn't mean that you have to go change that thing.
Because the game might not be for them, whatever, but you do need to acknowledge they're not going to be alone. Like some people will feel the same way this person feels. Yep. And we had experiences like when we were working on Talify, somebody we play tested with, and somebody told us this game needs flamethrowers. And we were like, does it though?
It's probably a little specific.
Yeah. And so, but then I think there's nuggets in there which may speak to parts about the game that might be confusing.
Basically, they were probably thinking like everything's a projectile. It'd be cool if there was something more
different,
just different.
Yep.
Maybe some variability would be good.
Yeah,
that is a fact. It would have been nice. Right. So I think it's one of those things you ask follow-up questions, that sort of thing, as opposed to being enraged, or mask your rage with follow-up questions. And so
but not ones that sound like you're being defensive. Like you just it's really hard to
not like, what the fuck does that mean, buddy?
Yeah. So if somebody says, here's what I think is wrong with your game, the first thing you need to say is, I agree. Let's talk about that. Right.
Yeah.
Even if you don't agree.
Or you just say interesting. What,
Yeah.
Like how did, what about that is hitting you? Because things like usually if you poke people, they'll just start talking. And most people don't know what they're actually talking about until they get like a little bit into it. So you got to get them.
Because they're expressing basically feelings based on this experience they've just
had. And they're
had.
trying to articulate.
And they're trying to articulate it through a belief that they understand why they had those feelings, but they actually don't know why they had those feelings. And so your job is to not be a dick about it so that you can together, find that middle point where you figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yes. It's collaboration with your players.
Yeah. So good luck, coffee chemist. Buckle up.
Buckle up because it's going to hurt.
Yeah. And you and your partner in this need to just start practicing like legit, honest critique of each other's stuff.
There's a book.
It's very hard, takes a lot of effort. But at some point you just get to be like, I don't like this. And that person's like, that's fair. And then you just move on with your lives. But it took us years to get to the point where we can just do that. And even still, we have to be careful about it, because you can't like it.
You should just never be a dick to someone. It's sort of the general rule.
On either side. Either giving the feedback or responding.
Right. But the problem is that people interpret critique as somebody being a dick to them when that's not what it is by default.
Well, I mean,
you can be a dick about it.
Right.
You could
critique itself. But critique itself is not mean. You can be mean about how you deliver critique. But the problem is that we've all somehow been taught that critique itself
it's because of school.
Is bad and mean.
This is the point to understand. It's literally because of school.
Because there's always an F attached to it.
There's a value judgment attached to it.
Yeah.
Being wrong is bad.
Because you don't get a paper back and they're like, all right, you got like a D on this. But if you do these things, you'll probably actually get up to more like a B sort of level.
Well, and also
you get a paper back and they're like, yeah, you suck. You have no opportunity to improve.
Well, but I think this is actually an important
punished for it.
This is an important note about the grading system at school is there's no way to actually recover.
Yeah.
Like if you
it's
fail,
a slippery slope downward.
Yeah, and this is of course speaking to the way that the education system works where we grew up, but the concept is like there's a certain number of points available for each assignment or test or whatever, and if you miss points, if you make mistakes, they are just irredeemably gone.
Yep.
So if you have like 2 exams and that's where your grade comes from, and you get an F on the first one, that's it.
Yep.
You're done now. The best you can hope for is like a C, right? Why do we?
I think because actions have consequences.
But they don't really.
I mean, not those. But it's like most things, right? It's all a very confused sort of chain lettered, or it's more like telephoned, sort of end point from what might have started as a good idea, right? Which is that what grades are I think what grades are actually supposed to be measuring is how diligent you were in preparing to understand the material. Because I think the idea is that if everyone is equal, then if everybody puts in the work, then everybody can do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you do worse than somebody else, that means you didn't put in the work. And there are consequences, permanent consequences to that, right?
Well,
I think that's kind of the idea. In practice, of course, it's not quite how things shake out.
Yeah, what happens in the real world is you fuck a thing up, you're like, oh, I fucked that up. I better go fix it. And then you fix it.
Yeah.
Because this is something that
but there are 2 kinds of fucking it up though, right? There's the kind that people mostly do in school. Because this is why I'm actually not against this in school, because I honestly believe that the main fuck ups from school come from people just not putting in the work.
Yeah, that's true.
And that but
here's the thing. If you say, well, you didn't put in the work for this midterm, you have an F now. And now no matter how hard you work from this point forward, you're just screwed now.
Yeah,
so it's very
I agree.
demotivating.
There should be ways to recover, right? But I think the interpretation though is fair, which is that there should be consequences in that scenario where it's just, because to me that's actually doing the wrong thing.
But I don't think
versus just fucking something up, that's a different thing.
But I think they're similar because the outcome is the same, and really what you want is for that person to make a change of some kind, either in their approach or in sort of their understanding. And so like what Sam and I ended up doing for our game dev course is your grade came from a midterm and a final, and we broke the midterm down by categories. So people were making a game for each thing, and so like one of the grading categories was juice, like how juicy is your game. And so the midterm had that category, and so did the final. And if you got a 0 on the midterm, we didn't tell the students this until after the fact that this was how this was going to work. But if you got a 0 on your midterm in juice, but you figured it out and came to us and, sort of learned how it worked and did it, and you got all the points on the final, then you recovered those points on the midterm. So it ratcheted your midterm grade back up to that same thing because your overall grade should reflect, do you understand the things that you need to understand in this course, right?
Yeah, it depends on the purpose of school, right? Because
If
the
it's to
purpose
teach
of,
people things.
no, well, yeah, but it's not necessarily, right? Because the purpose of school, what in college, which is what you're talking about, is to teach people things, supposedly, right? The purpose of college when we're young people is not actually to teach us jack shit. It's to socialize us so that we can handle being out amongst people in our
the purpose of like high school
or
middle school.
high school, middle school, that kind of stuff, right? I mean, like it's sort of about education, right? But it's mostly about socialization.
It doesn't have to, but those don't have to be mutually.
No, I'm not defending anything about how it actually does.
That's just the way it currently.
That's just the way it currently is. Yeah. But I would also disagree about this idea that like that school in general doesn't have systems where they have like ratcheting or that you can fix past mistakes and so on. Because I'm actually pretty sure that almost all the classes I've ever had included some sort of like extra credit so you can try to recover.
It's on a teacher by
things.
teacher basis.
Yeah, it's on a teacher by teacher basis. But I think it is still. But I do think that this idea though that people in school align together, not putting in the work and just fucking something up. Right? Because there's like being wrong and there's being wrong because it's your fault because you did a bad thing, which is not put in the work. Right.
This is like my garden.
Right. Right. And I think to me, that's where the bad, this is where the bad part comes from, because being wrong because you just couldn't have known is not even fine. That's fucking great. Cause now somebody gets to point that out to you and you get to learn. And that's where the collaborative awesomeness comes from of you working with a partner. Being wrong because you just didn't do due diligence like that. Yeah, you can recover now. Like you shouldn't be punished forever for that, right? But that was your fuck up. You got to own that now, right? And that was something that you actually should feel a little bad about because that like there was no reason for that. And that's how you do better is by recognizing that you fucked it up, shouldn't have, and you just do better next time. But when it comes to things that you just couldn't have known better, it's completely absurd to see that as a negative thing where you attach value judgments and do all this stuff to, because there was no way around that. And it's an opportunity to learn, and it truly wasn't your fault. Like there's not a thing.
Here's the thing: if I made an origami crane, let's say,
sure,
and it was just hideous.
Yeah.
Even though I don't know how to fold, I don't know anything about what I'm doing. How could it have been
better?
How could it have been better? But still, it's pretty hideous, and I value it a lot. And someone's like, that is a fucking ugly crane.
Yeah, I mean, they should probably be.
You've been banned from the Origami Association.
You're kicked out forever. Yeah, I'm gonna feel bad about that. You know, I mean, I think because it goes back to the fact that like anything you make, you personally inflate the value of, right?
Yeah.
Like the value to you is huge, and so whether that's paper, whether it's a game, whether it's some origami crane, whatever else,
you got to recognize that just because this is just universally true, and it's something you have to then practice. It's just because something is valuable to you doesn't mean it's valuable to somebody else.
That's okay.
And so if you then take that crane to somebody else.
And expect
in the wrong context, right? If it's your spouse and you're pumped about the first thing you made and they get that, they know what has just happened, then yeah, they're going to be pumped for you too. They're going to be like, oh, that's awesome. Nice work. You know? Right. But if you take it to some rando and you're like, I want you to buy this from me for $10 fucking dollars.
Be like, leave me with your crane,
with your ugly, hideous crane. Cause now you've offended sensibilities now, you know? Context,
reminds me of
context
one
matters.
time I was walking down the street and a vendor tried to sell me a balloon. Like a 6 foot wide balloon.
Yeah.
I was like, what? What makes you think I need that?
You look like a man who needs a huge balloon.
How dare you? Trying to make me part with my money for this giant balloon.
I had one too where I was wearing a watch and I was somewhere and somebody came with like a wall of watches. You know,
did they do the trench coat of watches thing?
I think they had a case open. Okay. I wish it was a trench coat. But they opened this up. They were talking about how awesome all these watches were, and I was like, I'm wearing a watch. I don't need a watch. Everything is just fine, you know. And they were so insistent that sure, I already had all my needs covered, but look at all these watches.
That's the thing. It's like a lot of people who own one watch don't just own one watch. That's true. It's like the shoes equivalent.
I mean, honestly, I do own 2, but one of them is broken.
Okay, so you basically own one.
I own 1.5.
You own one, and then you own a piece of art.
Yes,
it's not a watch anymore.
Correct.
It's watching nothing.
Well, for me, the balloon situation was, especially when I said no, and then the guy started trying to negotiate it, where he's like, "I'll give you half price. It's a really good deal," and I'm like, "You don't understand.
I have no interest in your balloons,
even if
ma'am.
You gave me $10, I wouldn't take it because I don't want to carry this fucking balloon around, right?" So I think that's what you have to acknowledge is actually like you have to think about the other person and what they need because
they might not need your balloon.
The thing that you're offering them might even be bad enough for them that you couldn't even pay them to take it off your hands.
And that's okay. The balloon is not for that person.
that person.
It might just be for you.
Yeah.
That's also fine.
It's
Just
fine.
just don't try to sell it to me.
You just got to understand.
I feel we got off on some metaphorical weirdness.
So I hope that answers whatever the question was.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It may or may not. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bard, for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord and forums running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, you can hop into our Discord server, which is at discord.gg/bscotch, and come say hello. Also, if you'd like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, swag, or whatever else you
Clothing.
piercings,
Tattoos.
we got neck piercings, face piercings, eye
Jugular
piercings,
piercings.
jugular
We got
piercings,
everything.
any kind of piercings you need. We got
some really good armpit piercings that kind of span the whole.
They go in one armpit and out the other,
Yeah.
right through the
Yeah.
torso.
Bar.
That's my favorite one. It takes a little while to recover from it. You know?
Uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It's a
and
little
also it's a little bit. It's not very efficient because it's just a tiny stud that's visible on each side
With a wire that goes in between.
with a bar that goes through your whole torso.
We couldn't figure out another way to do it, though.
But you know, piercing culture just is its own thing. You know what I mean? So it's not up to us.
Although
to
if you have a pacemaker, please don't get that because
or a
the
body.
wire interferes.
If you have lungs or a heart, you're also going to run into some situations.
Yeah, but if you've only got one lung, we could probably kind of wrap it back there a little bit. And
Yeah,
if you
the
got
bar-
just half of your heart, like the front half,
The bar contours.
Yeah.
It contours to the organs.
as long as you don't have very many.
As long as you don't have very many organs. So we got those. Also, we have, that's at shop.bscotch.net. I should
go
probably
there.
say where that is.
Buy things.
Also, you can send us something if you'd like. We have a mailbox, which you can find the address for at mailbox.bscotch.net. We're kind of slowing down on the candy because we're aging. Yeah, and we're dying now.
One of our wonderful listeners sent us infinite M&Ms yet again. And last week I started eating them, and I just felt like I was going to die.
We can't.
So
we can't anymore.
So send us maybe like a beef jerky pack. You know, we'll transition to that direction.
Maybe a granola. You know,
a delightful granola.
just a single grain, a grain-nola.
Yeah, we got to watch our figures.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.